Hello, everybody. Good day. Good day, good day, good day. It is a pleasure to see you all. My name is Dustin Cormier, and this is another episode of How to Rock Astrology. At the present time, we are about to embark on a video discussing the new video that I've had planned called Natal Moon in Gemini. So if you have Gemini in your birth chart, or if somebody you know has Gemini in their birth chart, this is a video that you might find some interest in. Of course, as usual, we're going to read about this natal moon sign from several different texts, and the main one being an author known as Pratyush Bhattacharya, who's a student of my teacher, Ernst Wilhelm. So thank you very much. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Now, as you might have recognized that I had to restart my video because I had a little bit of technical difficulty, but now we are in the clear. So thank you all for coming along and joining us for the ride here. So as usual, this is a live stream. If you're hanging out and you're watching live, you can please feel free to join us in the comments. Give us a little typey type. And as well, if you're watching live, feel free to ask any questions. Feel free to be a part of the reading, because our conversation about Gemini today is going to be just like all the other ones we do in this series. And it's going to be fun. Now, for those watching, before we get into our reading today, I'd like to remind you that I've recently created a new, a new book. This is an ebook that has now been officially released for free on my website. You can check it out by going to dustincormier.com/subscribe. You'll subscribe to my email list where you can hear all about the new books, the new videos, the new courses, and all the promotional material that I have coming along. And I hope you enjoy that. The book itself is a poetic rendition of the mind of a man with dementia. It's a real psychedelic map of human consciousness and what it means to live and to remember. So I hope you guys enjoy that. Now let's get down to business here. The moon in Gemini. Gemini is, of course, ruled by the planet Mercury. Mercury is a friend to the moon. Generally speaking, the moon in Gemini, I am a tropical Vedic astrologer, by the way. And tropical Vedic astrologers can tend to be more fatalistic about readings than the West. We have a little bit more chutzpah when it comes to pointing out that there are some positions that are better than others for certain planets. Now, the moon in Gemini is average, if above average. It's average by archetype, but it's a bit above average because Mercury, who rules Gemini, is a friend of the moon. So we can see this in this little picture that we've prepared here. What the moon wants from its sign, that's the Rashi. The moon says, this sign is the only source of happiness in my existence. I want the world to shower me with this. And this image comes from the wife of Ernst Wilhelm, who painted it and drew it. So we can see Gemini is above average. It's Gemini and Virgo are there basically because the moon has Mercury for a friend. And it has to do with the communication. It has to do with the moon desiring to communicate and to even be playful, to experiment and break out of its own little egoic cage. When the moon is delighted by Mercury, as it is for people with the moon in Gemini, there's a tendency for communication to bring inner illumination as to the goodness of one's inherent nature, the goodness of one's desires. They communicate and try and explore and expand. Moon in Gemini is very just trying new things. Everything in Gemini is always trying new things. And it's a for better or worse thing, especially for some planets. For the moon, it tends to go well, although the caveat here is that why it's not considered one of the ultimate placements is that it can be a little bit scattered. The moon in Gemini can be a tad emotionally scattered. It can disperse its emotional, devotional energy and its building up of its personality into earth, more than ether, onto the earth, because earth tattva relates to the planet Gemini. The moon can dissipate its sense of itself by being so sensitive to the immediate moment. Now, the moon is a key part of who we are. It's our, as Stephen Arroyo mentions, the moon represents how one reacts based on subconscious disposition. So the moon is really how we are going to react to the world. And we want to be comfortable. The subconscious doesn't like to be surprised. So we like to situate ourselves in an environment where we can comfortably react. And that will bring us out at our best and most natural state. And this is good for whatever the moon rules by house, depending on the rising sign. The moon in Gemini is a chatty Cathy. It tends to react to things in a spontaneous way. And the character of Gemini is very steeped into the character of a person with the moon in Gemini. So, hello, Anana. Nice to see you. Now, what this can manifest as is, the air signs are very sensitive to the moment. They're appropriate. They read the room. And the moon in Gemini can be the king or queen of reading the room. But by reading the room, it's good really to always read the room. Because the moon is looking to adapt to its situation, to adapt to its surroundings. The moon is the queen who must serve the will of the king, the sun, the solar, the agenda. The sun is like a fixed will that this person has, that we all have. The moon says, okay, so I have this fixed will, but I got to dance around. I got to tell people what they want to hear. I got to compromise. I've got to find a compromise so that the king does not suffer for lack of its objectives, but that the world that I'm well received in the world, is what I'm trying to say. The moon allows us to be well received in the world. And at a deep spiritual level, the moon allows us to feel well received in the world. This is very important. People disregard that emotional dimension of the brain. If there's resistance to how you are in the world, then you are going against the grain. You're not acting economically. The most economical thing you could do is to act in a way that suits and is conducive to your nature. Now, what is this nature? Well, it's funny that the moon in Gemini, their nature is to be very bendable and adaptable with their nature. And this is part of the reason why we say that their energy can be dispersed. A wonderful phrase, it comes from Zodiac Sounds. There's a great poem from the 60s called Zodiac Sounds. It's an album, actually. It's a musical album. And every song has music related to the sign. It's really great if you've never read it. I should do a video on it. Oh, I'm going to do that. And in that album, each sign has poetry associated with it. And one of for the poem of Gemini, just reminding myself of that. The poem for Gemini reads, Gemini, a warm hand on a cold day, a cool hand on a hot day, a cool wind on a hot day. So Gemini is always wry and reading the room and acting in accordance with what everyone's thinking. Moon in Gemini often says what everyone's thinking. And this is why they can be so funny. Sometimes you have conversations with them and you can't tell, like sometimes they're being a bugger and they're speaking to a moment in a way that is like you can tell that they're just being wry. They've got a nervous energy that can be never fully satisfied, but it is in that clever nerve that they're actually comfortable. They love to argue, and I don't necessarily mean that in a bad way. They actually love to discuss, and they love to play devil's advocate. They love to play the counterpoint. And the counterpoint is created by the moment, by the people talking, which is why they can have that social chameleon quality that a lot of people, if you don't have any air in your chart, then you could almost seem like, who is this person really? What are they deep down? That this is what they are deep down. And again, this is a good position for the moon. So the moon ultimately, usually with the moon in Gemini, the person does not feel lacking for a sense of identity and for a comfortable sense of self that they can operate through. The moon in Gemini, ruled by Mercury, allows them to shed their resistance. They don't hold on to an expected way of being. And so whatever happens, they tend to shed their resistance and be very adaptable. And this serves them very well as long as their sense of what they seek emotionally is not dispersed. And this is what can happen to the worst, at the worst case of Gemini, moon in Gemini, is that they can feel like they are a flag in the wind, getting thrown around by the winds of circumstances and lacking their own natural center. And at the worst, when the moon is very ill-placed in Gemini, the person, like everyone with the moon, finds it hard to grasp an environment, a private life that makes them feel comfortable. Usually the mother will have something to do with this. If they weren't loved enough by their mother, then they'll play on the moon and Gemini character in order to please everybody and never really pleasing themselves. These are just classic archetypes of a disgruntled moon. When the moon is harmed, a person tries to show everybody, tries to put in a lot of effort to feeling lovable, to feeling valuable. And why would you work so hard at something that can come without lifting a finger? This is how the moon in Taurus tends to operate when it's exalted or when the moon is bright, by archetype. Now the moon, another good thing about the moon in Gemini is that it is close to Taurus. It is close to its exaltation point, which means that there is a natural positive swing in this regard. Although planets do better when they're moving towards exaltation, not after it. So the moon in Gemini is now going away from its exaltation point, but it's still close to it. And that's a positive benefit as well. It shows that this person has some sense of emotional intelligence. They get the sense that I do well when I move close to Taurus, when I have my own emotional center, and I don't have to fight for it. I don't have to fight to keep lovers in my life. I am what I am, and I know that that will attract what I need to attract. That's a good moon. And they can sense this. But again, remember everybody, the moon by sign is a very small part of the planet experience. You have to check everything going on in a chart. Especially with the moon, you got to check its brightness. When the moon is going from new moon to full moon, not the other way. When the moon is going from new to full, it's waxing, it's going to be stronger. When it's closer to full, it's also going to be stronger. The closer the moon is to full, the better. And of course, as the closer it is to exaltation, the better it is. Here it's pretty good. The angles from the sun, the aspects from its friends, in this case is Mercury and the sun. Thankfully, Mercury is already delighting the moon here. So that's a good thing. But angles from malefics, the moon could be squashed in or hemmed in by malefics. Bonjour, hello Nimira, hello Stephen the Jupiterian. The moon can be conjunct malefics or conjunct Saturn. It can be weak in what's called Shadbala, which is its total strength. You know, Ucha and Chesta, all these different things add up to the picture of every planet. So you can't just get, you can't say, oh, my moon's in Gemini, it's going to be good or bad. It's good by sign, but you have to qualify it with all the other things in astrology. If you're ever interested in doing that, you can check out my website and I can do a consultation with you. Now, let's read a little bit about the sign of Gemini here and get into the meat of our story. The first thing we're going to do is begin with Stephen Arroyo's Chart Interpretation Handbook. I like this book. It's a Western guide that gives us a glimpse and a taste of a very personality-based vision of what to expect from this planet in the signs. And Stephen Arroyo tells us that this is how the moon, especially by sign, represents how a person reacts based on subconscious predisposition. So here with the moon in Gemini, we learn that the person reacts quickly, perceptively, changeably, and with unending curiosity. When something new happens to the person, especially something emotional, they have a character to them. They have a bouncy, reactive character. It's very quick, very swift with a word, and quick with an observation of something that might help the person in front of them. They're very situational again. Now, when we think of the moon in Gemini, what is the environment that this queen is going to build? The queen of the brain, right? What we read is that the moon in Gemini feels secure in responding to a variety of mental stimuli and in being involved in more than one activity at a time. Now, this is the nature of Gemini, and we could see how the moon would make itself comfortable in a moving cog full of many moving pieces. That's how Gemini likes to be. That's where they feel safest in a way. You know, they emotionally contend well when they are in a social situation with many moving pieces, as we said. They like to be in groups, and they tend to be, depending on how it's going on in the chart, they like to be a part of conversation. And they feel secure by acknowledging their own capacity to connect dots, to connect pieces together in a group and bring them into one cohesive whole, and even to manage them. Managing conversations is a fun thing for Moon and Gemini. They're very sensitive to the nature of people in a conversation in a situation. You could be talking, like the moon in Gemini will bounce around and be the blend with things. If we're talking about something political, like, American politics right now is a little bit crazy in the world. The moon and Gemini person, the object is American politics. Now, if they're going to talk to a conservative person, the moon in Gemini is, so you're a conservative person. Okay, so, and they'll play into the arc of a conservative person, and then they'll see into the person themselves. The object is to talk American politics, and if a Gemini moon talks American politics to one person, they'll test them, like, what the liberals say this, the Democrats say this. And then they'll go to, let's say they talk to a more liberal lefty person, and all of a sudden the moon in Gemini is pressing their buttons and agreeing almost with different things. Now, they have their own center, they have their own beliefs, but they are going to operate it differently through every person that they talk to. And especially when they get into groups, they love to play on the antagonism between two contradictory positions in conversation. They love this kind of play. They love to mix things together in this way. They're a blender. Now, the moon in Gemini adapts to change by using the mind and making connections. Making connections through the mind. Thinking about things, The moon is the place where we're all quietly, reflectively observing who we are and thinking about how to adapt what we seek into the world. How the moon in Gemini is going to do it is mentally making connections in the world. It's a powerful thing because that Mercury is funny because it's both emotional and cerebral. It's actually the bridge between the sun and the rest of the planets. The sun being purely almost cerebral, intelligent, logical, also soulful. And Mercury is the connection to the more emotional, feeling, karmic dimensions of the planets. So Mercury has the capacity, when the moon is delighted by Mercury, the power of Mercury is to give the moon what it seeks emotionally while still thinking through with mental reasoning. And your mental reasoning can help you to see where my emotions, my attachment to something, is blocking my realization of what's best in this situation. The moon can stop us from being objective. Our emotions can stop us from being objective. And we don't want to remove our emotions entirely. We want to take our emotions into context. And the moon in Gemini is good at doing this because it thinks about its emotions mentally through its mind without neglecting those emotions. Powerful thing. It's not a bad placement. Now, the moon in Gemini communicates about their inner emotional life. They have a need to verbalize their emotions in order to feel connected with their emotions. They tend to talk with people. It's another reason why they can kind of get things off their chest, and they do it pretty constantly, pretty often, and pretty much with anybody. They're happy to just do the human thing of like, you have emotions, right? I have emotions too. Let's do the thing. They talk to a stranger on the bus or at a bar, and they can have a pretty genuine conversation with just about anyone. Although, again, there's this dispersion that can happen where, you don't want to run away from the depth of your emotional experience. You do have to be careful about that with Moon and Gemini. That's what we read, is that their sense of security can be deterred by emotional energy scattered in many directions. The Moon in Gemini can mentally get carried away with trying to solve emotional problems mentally. So what's most important is that the person doesn't diffuse their true emotional depth and their true emotional needs by just talking and scattering, because the mind and words, when a Moon and Gemini person is trying to move through therapy or try to talk to a partner, try to have a real deep conversation, they've got a wittiness and a character that almost doesn't want to go into the deep thing and just stay, cut the crap, you have nobody to impress, just stay there, hold what you're trying to say, hold the pain that you're going through, and don't feel the need to talk all around it. Just move around the lip of the thing without actually sitting with the pain and having the true, genuine emotional experience. The Moon in Gemini has to watch this, and the Moon in Gemini has to ensure that when it is in a deep emotional confrontation, that it doesn't use words and cerebral entertainment, and no matter how brilliant it is, that you don't want to let that take away from your authenticity, from your depth of emotional reality. And the Moon in Gemini, this will depend on the overall strength of the Moon, aspects from its friends, etc. If the Moon is very ill-placed, if it's conjunct Saturn, if it's hemmed in by malefics, if it doesn't have good Shadbala strength, if it's closer to the top of the chart, because it likes to be close to the bottom, these are things that can happen. The Moon disperses itself. It can't just sit with its emotional truth. When the Moon is close to the bottom of the chart, it's got good aspects from its friends. It'll be chatty, it'll be funny. If you ever tried to counsel a person with the Moon in Gemini, they're so funny. I've got the Moon in Sagittarius, so I love all things Gemini. And they can be so funny about, this is the most wry, important part of the conversation, and they're still they're like Jim Carrey or something, well, what do you know about that? They've got such a character and a spontaneity and a nerve to the way they talk. And when it comes off well, even in the depths of a deep emotional conversation, they can find wit and humor in it, which is amazing. And it lightens the load, and everyone's like, okay, we can stop taking ourselves so seriously. Beautiful. Everybody loves that about Gemini. So long as the intention of the conversation isn't dispersed by a nervous defense mechanism. Oh, cool. Jim Carrey has Moon in Gemini. Yes! Didn't even know that, but at some level I must have. Alrighty then. Yes! Guessed correctly. I guess I didn't technically guess, but thank you, Moon Vibes, for letting me know. That's amazing. Because I see that with Jim Carrey. If you were to try to have a conversation with him in his heyday of something very deep going on with him, I'm sure it would have been hard to pull him out of the Jim Carrey clown character that he displays so unconsciously, especially when he was into drugs and stuff like that, let's just move around the object in the center of the room. And that's what these people have to watch out for. But honestly, it's so worth that amazing Jim Carrey character. For me, on the outside. But ultimately, what is most worth it for you, only you can know. That's why I'm giving these caveats and thoughts. So that was Stephen Arroyo's Chart Interpretation Handbook. I like this book. It gets down to the personality of the person. Let's take a little peek at another Western author. This is Astrology, A Cosmic Science by Isabelle M. Hickey. She's a great Western author. And we're going to check out what she has to say about the Moon in Gemini. So, Isabelle M. Hickey often just gives little, she's very esoteric minded. It's very Western, sort of Western occult that she kind of has her roots in. like Rosicrucian, Aleister Crowley kind of esoteric, Western esoteric occultism. So let's read a little bit of what she says. Just to give some broad strokes of, broad strokes of Moon in Gemini character. We read that the Moon in Gemini is versatile, shrewd, and critical. Versatile, shrewd, critical. Mercury is earth. Mercury is discerning. That's why Mercury is so funny. That's why anybody with the Moon in Gemini especially can be so funny. But Moon in Virgo, too. Moon in Virgo is funny because they have such a they have a character. Like, I can't believe, like they're so affected by the little details in life. So they're shrewd, mentally especially. And that shrewdness is meant in a positive way. We read that there's dual forces in the subconscious. The moon relating to the subconscious in this case. And this person can be superficial. Now, Gemini is the 12th sign from Cancer. And of course, Cancer rules the moon. This is an interesting insight. So this person can be their own worst enemy. Hey, Rishab, nice to see you. When it comes to what the moon is doing, the moon in the natural 12th house from its only ruling sign, all other 7 planets except for the sun and the moon. The sun and the moon only rule one sign. The moon only rules Cancer. That is the heart and center of the moon. So for it to be in the 12th house from its most natural place, we can see that the moon in Gemini, really, it's psychedelic to think about how their natural expression involves a almost 12th house sublimation of the unconscious disposition of Cancer, of the moon, of the nature of the person. And this is what their nervy energy sometimes moves through. It can be a benefit. It's not necessarily a bad thing when you're involved with the 12th house from anything. There is, though, there can be a pain. There can be a pain to the moon in Gemini. But they move through that pain. This is actually a positive thing, in my opinion. But let's read what Isabelle M. Hickey says about it. She mentions that this person can be their own worst enemy because they are so open subconsciously to moving through whatever pains they're moving through. But what we read is that there's a need for this person to be honest. They can't let the nervous tension that they experience from their sensitivity to themselves or others stop them from speaking into manifestation their true desire and their true will, their true emotional will. This person is restless in search of truth. They need to look beneath the surface of things. There's a longing for knowledge, and they can spread themselves too thin and scatter and disperse their forces, like we said. Now, unless Saturn or the sign of Scorpio is strong, this person can waste tremendous energy in chattering, just constantly talking about everything and saying much and saying little. They have a jittery nervous system. They're torn apart by changing feelings which reflect in their nervous tension. Now, this could be expected from anyone with the moon in a Mercury-ruled sign. Moon in Virgo is neurotic. They can be neurotic because they internalize this chatteriness. And they still have it. But the moon in Gemini really moves through it and if their maraca, it's okay that their maraca shakes as long as the maraca doesn't shake them. As long as the maraca is not in control. Which means, you know, stuff that calms the parasympathetic nervous system. Yoga, qigong, meditation, pranayama. Practices like this can really help to bring down this nervous energy. The moon in Gemini can perhaps have too strong a tie with their relatives. The moon being emotional, Gemini relating to siblings, to relatives, to close early family. Now, this person is not a free agent if they cling too long to family pattern. And in a male chart in particular, this person attracts a nervous and high-strung mate. You'll notice we always hear a little bit of a glimpse of, in Isabelle Hickey's work, when we read the moon sign, we hear that in a man's chart, a man tends to attract the quality and character of a woman based on the man's moon sign. So the man with the moon in Gemini is going to feel comfortable with a person who also has some of this high energy, chattery, nervy energy. They feel comfortable there, right? You feel emotionally, reactively, subconsciously comfortable in that space. The woman, on the other hand, usually look for the sun in its sign. Maybe I'll have to do another series. I think eventually I am going to do a series discussing the sun and its signs. Oh, I see. Yeah, I'm just looking for it here, but that's okay. Now, that is our Western writers on the subject of the moon in Gemini. I always love to go through them. It's always informative. Now let's start digging into the bread and butter here. The big biscuit. This is Decoding Zodiac with Vedic Astrology by Pratyush Bhattacharya. And he's going to give us the guts of what we've already discussed, which is the rather neutral interaction of the moon with Gemini. I've already gone pretty far into this video, and I'm noticing that this is a long reading. So I'm going to do my best to just sort of dig into this here. And yes, it is from Pratyush Bhattacharya that we learned that the moon in Gemini is generally considered neutral, but as I would say, I don't have my picture anymore, as I would say, it's a bit more like above average because the moon is delighted by its friend Mercury in this sign. It's in naturally good dignity. So let's start digging into it. This is Pratyush Bhattacharya discussing the Gemini moon interaction. Now, what we read is that the sign of Gemini produces the ability to explore everything that piques our curiosity and let us express what we learn from such exploration through articulate communication. Each one of these things that he says, you could sit and digest. Let us express what we learn from such exploration via articulate communication. Mercury ruled Gemini is very deliberate and delicate and exquisitely detailed and precise and concise in the way that it wants to say something. Maybe not concise, but precise in the way that they articulate something. So Gemini moon, Gemini overall is concise like this. Excuse me. Gemini overall as a sign is precise and articulate. So when the moon is here, this produces the natural urge to explore everything intriguing, to understand how a system of interest works under the hood. Especially Gemini moon can be very interested in my interaction with you and how that interaction works under the hood. Gemini moons can often be interested in astrology because they want to see how my personality works with the alchemical archetypes of your personality. What are the cogs that are making these turn in the way that they turn? They want to read and learn all about it. So Mercury is the planet of games. In its masculine sign, Gemini, every planet, except for the moon and sun, rules two signs, a masculine and a feminine. In this case, Mercury rules Gemini, which is masculine, and Virgo, which is earth, which is feminine. So Mercury's masculine sign, Gemini, enables us to explore and experiment in order to decipher the rules driving our system of interest and experience them for ourselves. That's funny, Oma Zubair. They are twin girls, and they both have Gemini moon. And they think, and you think that they're more masculine than their dad. That's hilarious. Gemini moon can have this masculine quality for this reason. Gemini moon craves the intellectual satisfaction of figuring out how everything works and then having fun sharing their understanding with the world. Essentially, these individuals are trying to understand the fundamental rules of life, often expressed as an interest in science, art, and especially the performing arts, where they can move through the feeling and drama of one or another positions or ways of approaching conflict or ways of approaching joy. They like to experience it for themselves, to put their finger in it, to taste it, to smell it for themselves. And once they understand the rules that a system is governed by, then their natural urge is to communicate their understanding. Hanny, I would say that women like talking more, and women certainly do like to, discuss everything under the sun. The masculine quality that we're describing here is more about actively exploring and experimenting with the rules, with the ideas that are being discussed. It's true that the feminine dimension of consciousness loves to talk. What we're talking about here with Gemini being the masculine sign is that there's a driving, penetrating experiment and exploration. They'll put on a character and push that character into the narrative of a conversation. They'll do things that drive a conversation in experimental ways. They'll take control of the conversation. And this is more of that masculine energy of an air sign or of a fire sign that we're describing here. I hope that makes sense. So their desire to communicate makes Gemini-focused individuals the most articulate speakers, writers, educators, and performing artists. Understanding the underlying mechanism of a system and explaining it to those curious about it provides Gemini moon a necessary nourishment to sustain a sense of separate identity. Their ability to explain what's happening, because I've experienced it, and this is how I think it works for me, and this is how it might work for you. That very detailed thing is a way for them to extend love and to bond with other people. People begin to find that the Gemini moon person is very practically useful in understanding how I relate to the world. And this draws people to the Gemini moon and allows them to feel the stable sense of security that the moon seeks. Right? Playing with my hair here. I don't like this V going on. I gotta cut my hair soon. Story of my life. Now, Gemini enables to pick up new skills quickly in order to adapt to a changing environment. It does so through communication by asking the right questions. So the more skilled and well-articulated this person is, the more worthy of love they believe they are. So they can be charming, smart, witty, highly skilled, and well-informed. And they can adapt and improvise to situations with great flexibility. I'm reminded again of Jim Carrey, this ability to play on anything and anyone with the spontaneity that he has. So these individuals want to be loved and cherished for their skills. This makes them feel right at home while performing in front of an applauding audience. They desire to be in the public eye, as Gemini is the only sign symbolized by a human couple, indicating that they have a bit of an aversion to solitude. Gemini feels naturally loved and appreciated when their skills, sense of humor, or charming and playful persona are praised. They tend to form strong emotional bonds with people who offer such praises. This is interestingly, Cancer, the sign of Cancer is the most feminine sign and relates more than any other sign to the deep self-reflection and introspection of the quiet soul, of the soul inside of ourselves that exists, that doesn't need to be spoken about. In fact, the more we try to speak it, the less we are it, and are at its most natural. And that's why it's interesting that Gemini is in the 12th house from this Cancer sign, right? So the moon in Gemini is the 12th sign from its natural ruling place of Cancer. And what we kind of see here is that the Gemini chattiness, the social quality of being with other humans, actually can be isolating. It can make you feel alone. It can make you feel like you're not really truly heard. And this is part of the wisdom that's being conveyed by that understanding. Cool. To bots a lot. I could see Gemini moon wanting to talk to bots. That's interesting, just to see the interplay. Square Pluto conjunct Jupiter in the Virgo in the 10th. That could be a lot of things there, Diane, that your husband doesn't tell anybody about his inner world. And this could be more of what we're talking about. The Gemini moon so loves to just be in the energy of other people, to interact with other people. The moon wants to find out its deepest inner reflective self. And if the way that it does that is through interacting with other people, it's only going to get whatever the other person allows them to reflect. But they might have a hard time truly getting at, nobody ever perhaps at some level gets at the deepest core of the Gemini moon. Because they're different things to different people. Probably they don't even see the deepest core of themselves. Because it only comes out in different ways to different people. But that can be a lot going on in there, Diane. Some Gemini moons are very capable of bringing the truth themselves out. Some are less so. It depends on everything else going on with the moon in the chart. So they're immensely satisfied when they're able to use their intelligence and skills to help solve problems for others. Again, they can help a person, they can understand the person and how the person might apply themselves to a problem that brings them a resolution. They understand the problem and they understand the person. And people can rely on them for this kind of practical advice. Now, Gemini moon people are naturally attracted to those who appear to have a better mastery over the sign of Gemini than they do. They crave to be surrounded by people who are just as much or more intelligent, skilled, and expressive than they are. They love people who have just as much Gemini, just as much character, just as much flick of the wrist, just as much flair, just as much intelligence as they do, right? And they'll find themselves being attracted to such people. Because Gemini, as a sign, as an archetype, can permeate through many archetypes. It can permeate through Mercury, permeate through any planets in Gemini. It can permeate through Gemini rising. Especially a man would be interested in a woman with Gemini rising or a partner with Gemini rising. Mercury can be the strongest planet in Shadbala. Mercury can be in the 10th house. They might have Rahu or Ketu in Gemini or Virgo. But anyone who has the quality of Gemini is going to intrigue this person. I'm always losing my chat for some reason. And that will make the Gemini moon person feel more comfortable in that person's presence, generally speaking. Now, Mercury, if it is anything, Mercury is the graha, the planet of friendship, as it produces the desire to play together. It wants us to share our resources. Mercury wants us to share our resources with our playmates to hone our skills. You know, we have these resources, we have these objects, we have these instruments, we have these games. And Gemini is the masculine dimension of Mercury. So I'm putting myself into the playing with it. I'm putting myself into experimenting with it, into honing it. It's very psychedelic when we think of Mercury as the planet of friendship that wants to share resources with playmates and to understand its resources and develop skills. And the masculine side of it, Gemini, is so pushing that agenda. You know, it's interesting to think about. Mercury enables us to learn from playful interaction. And this happens more efficiently when all the players participating in the game are equally skilled. So they like to work in a team with like-minded, curious people, where they can openly share their understanding and skills and their nuance of the game or of the field or of the talent to experience a joyful and highly engaging learning curve. This also goes to show, by the way, I should have mentioned this at some point, the importance of having a good Mercury in your chart. So if you've got a strong Mercury, it's going to allow you to move through everything that Gemini moon seeks much more strongly. Should have mentioned that in the beginning, but story of my life. Now, naturally, people with Gemini moon tend to express love by offering their friendship, understanding, skill, and information on a subject that can help solve the problem that their loved ones are facing. You know, really, when you think of how the planets unfold through the natural script of human life, it begins with the moon from age 0 to 1. It's very unconscious, blah, I need. And then from 1 to 3, we have Mars. It's the terrible twos. And then from age 3 to age 12, we have Mercury, the prince, the prepubescent puppy dog friendship awareness before we hit puberty. Then at age 12, the Venus period starts. And we go through puberty, and we think of what I am as a man or a woman or anything in between to other genders. So Mercury is a sort of prepubescent, pre-gender phase of human expression and self-awareness. And so this friendship theme is very important. A Gemini moon person really needs to understand that you and I can have a back and forth between each other as friends, as comrades. I can say anything to you, you can say anything to me, and it might even be a bit exaggerated, it might be nervy, it might be frustrated, but it'll also be excitable. It'll be and it will often, they need to be friendly. They need to feel like they would love this person if there was no such thing as gender, as male or female. And as time goes on, the gender quality becomes a part of that genderless soul fusion experience. And this is definitely not somebody who needs to neglect gender or become neuter or, transgender or anything like that. This is definitely not an indication of that. What this goes to say is that gender becomes an important afterthought, but it's an afterthought to the essential place where they feel comfortable bonding with a person, which is as a friend, a comrade, a companion. They need to enjoy playing with them, conversing with them, managing time with them, managing resources, talking with them about when are we going to hang out, how are we going to live our lives, who's going to clean the dishes and who's going to wash and who's going to dry the dishes, all that stuff. They need to enjoy that whole rigmarole. Now, Gemini's ability to form a team of like-minded people, where every resource is shared, is very compatible with the moon's desire to be surrounded by loving and caring people who appreciate us for who we are. Now at this point in our reading, Pratyush Bhattacharya is telling us the good side and the bad side of Gemini moon. At the end, we're at the ending now, and he's going to condense it all into a gumball. One of the good aspects of Gemini is that it's the desire and ability to form groups of like-minded people. This is compatible with the moon's desire to be surrounded by loving and caring people who appreciate us for who we are. And the moon in Gemini wants to have genuine connections. It's still close enough to Taurus that it's not enough to use people for this desire without having a genuine bond. Their friendships are sacred to them. Not only because they, a huge part of it is it's like, this is often how the moon operates, the type of need love. It's like an animal, it's a cat. The cat loves because it needs the human. But in the end, the cat needs the human needs the cat for emotional whatever. But you'll find after you've owned about 10, 15 cats in your life, whatever, or no, probably not that many, but after you've owned many cats in your life, you're going to have favorites. Some people do. Some people don't, I guess. But you'll love not just that need love, but also this specific cat, this specific person. And this is what happens with everybody with the moon. The moon in Gemini wants to be appreciated as a good friend who can always be counted on in times of need. This mentality of helping people solve their problems is compatible with the sattvic, motherly nature of the moon. Now, additionally, Gemini's ability to enjoy public attention and on-camera life because of their skills, it attracts a lot of people who become their fans. So thus, the moon's desire to feel loved is also easily satisfied by Gemini's skills. The moon wants to feel loved, wants its personality to be well received. Now, however, the moon has a certain need for calmness and stability, which Gemini, being an air sign, ruled by the ever-curious, quick-witted, and playful Mercury, cannot offer. It's hard for the moon in Gemini to do one aspect of what the moon wants to do, which is to have reflective calmness and stability, to be loved for what they are without having to do anything. See, when the moon is debilitated in Scorpio, and again, it has to prove everybody. I have to show everybody that I'm worthy of being loved. I'm again thinking of Jim Carrey. Now it's on my brain. I'm glad I think it was one of the people, and they might still be watching, who mentioned that Jim Carrey has the moon in Gemini. And he went on a whole trip where everyone loved the character that Jim Carrey acted out, but he got lost in the mirrors, and he began to feel like no one loves him for who he truly is. Because who we truly are is who we are when we're not trying, when we're not putting on a show. And so the moon's calmness and stability. There's moon vibes. Thanks, pal. So moon vibes was the one who mentioned Jim Carrey. So the desire for calmness and stability can get dissipated in Mercury. So Gemini enables us to quickly move from one experience to another whenever our initial thirst of curiosity is quenched. And this tendency to avoid diving deeper into any aspect of life, to go beyond the superficial noise of information, can be an issue with Gemini moon. The moon wants to dive deep to find spaces deep within the heart where nothing but pure intuition prevails. And everyone has the capacity to do this regardless of their sign. But Gemini can hinder the moon from naturally and easily reaching that state of deep intuitive unity with the world. And this often makes personalities produced by this interaction restless, relentlessly seeking more stimuli to overwhelm their senses in order to avoid facing the inner disconnect with their spiritual core. It's really what the moon is. It's a spiritual sattvic planet. It gets at the inherent luminosity of the self, which is beyond all character and archetype. There is a nature inside of all of us. If you get distracted by the neon lights, you won't be able to sit with the person in the car who's looking at the lights, the true inner witness. Overall, because of these reasons, Gemini moon is considered by Pratyush Bhattacharya to be a mixed interaction where the sign is somewhat compatible with the inhabiting graha, the inhabiting planet, the moon. Pratyush gives this final conclusive statement that the moon is mixed. It's average. It's neither too good nor too bad. I would say, again, that because the moon has Mercury for a friend, that generally speaking, this interaction is a little bit more than average. It's better than the other neutral signs conveyed here. It's doing pretty well because of that delight of the moon by Mercury. So that's an optimistic note for us to end on. Thank you guys so much for watching. My name is Dustin Cormier. If you've enjoyed this and you're enjoying my work, make sure you check out my new ebook that's just been released. You can find it by going to dustincormier.com/subscribe. You join my email list, and then you will get a free copy of this book. I'm very happy with the book. It's a poetic journey through the mind of a man with dementia. And of course, again, you can download it here. It's just a little teaser for you. And keep in mind that next Sunday, if you're watching live, Sunday, July, what would it be? Sunday, July 27th, I'm going to be doing a live stream dedicated to unfurling this, we're going to do a fundraiser live stream, cold readings. You'll be able to watch me live, get your birth chart read, and all the donations are going to go to mental health. So thank you so much for watching, everybody. Thanks to Moon Vibes. Thanks to Honey. We had Anana here. We had a few people watching live. Thank you for watching at home. I'm Dustin Cormier. This is How to Rock Astrology. Keep your eyes on the skies. Keep your eyes out for more material. And be sure to subscribe to me so you can see the more of the stuff that I've got going on in the world of Dustin Cormier. Thanks for watching. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your week. And I'll see you this weekend if you're hanging out with us on Sunday. Au revoir. Oh!